This next project isn't particularly earth-shattering. It's mostly about reusing some old timber, some old IKEA timber. I've been asked to make a shoe rack. Now I've got these, autofocus, I've got these side pieces from some shelving, and I've also got some slats from an old bed. The problem with the side pieces for the shelves is that the pins that support the shelves face across the width of the shelf rather than down the length of the shelf. So I'm going to have to make some cheek pieces to go in there and sit on the pins to which the shelves are attached. Now it just so happens that that bed that the slats came from had rails with a sort of an L-shaped section, and I think I can make some cheeks out of here. This piece here that sticks out, I reckon I can have resting on the pins in there, and I can fit the slats as shelves to this piece here. Now I'm going to have to be a bit careful, as there are these pins buried in this side piece, and I don't want the chop saw going through one of those, so I'll have to adjust my 30cm lengths to make sure I avoid those. So the chop saw's taken that down to the outside dimension of 30cm. Now the time's come to take a couple little pieces off here, so this piece drops down between here. These rails are 32mm each, so if I chop 32mm off each end of this part here, then I'll be able to get that down inside there, and I'll also be able to remove this pin because I want to route a little slot into here where this pin will go. So I need to set up a stop block here on the crosscut sled, and then I need to arrange that the height of the blade just clears the main part of this cheek that I don't want cut. I also have a waste piece that came off the first attempt at doing this that wasn't too successful, and that will help me keep this propped up level. I've hit a snag. These are the pins that the shelves, or rather the cheeks that the shelves will be on, will rest upon. But in order to keep the cheek pieces stable and not falling off, there needs to be a recess just here for the pin to sit in. And I was going to route them. These are 6mm pins. I have a 1/4 inch router bit, that's 6¼ mm, and that would have done very nicely. My mental picture was like this, and that I would be able to put a little recess in there that was essentially circular in profile, but of course they're not. They're like this, and I don't have anything long enough to reach up there nor clear here. So I'm going to have to do something different. And I found a cross piece here that's just the right distance from one of these holes, and if I rest the inner part here and drill through this hole, I'll just nicely graze here, and then I can finish that off with a tiny bit of filing or chiseling. The drillings that the pins go into are blind, and I need to drill from the other side, but these drillings go nearly all the way through. So if I bash the point of a nail, nice thick nail, through there, I should be able to pick up and drill it out from the other side. As I say, the pins that go in these drillings are 6mm, so I need to open them out to a bit bigger than that. I don't have a 1/4 inch drill bit, but I do have a 6.5mm brad point here, so I'm going level as I can with that. not bad. And now it just remains to take every one of these cheeks and make that hole there through my guide hole here. Trying to keep it nice and level and straight. And there we have the beginnings of a hole right at the top. I've done a bit of experimenting as to the best way to open out these holes here into channels, and chisels are best. So first of all, let's get the depth. And then the back of the channel. And then the sides. I have here one of the bed rails that are going to form the main lengths of the shelves, and I have here a cheek piece that didn't do so well, and I need to turn this into a jig. I need the jig because I need some way of holding these pieces in place when I glue and pin them in a moment. So I'm just going to lay out a line on here that the shelves will go along, and I'm going to leave room for the lip down here. So I've made these supports here, and there's another end up here to hold the second slat. And the other thing I need to do is to cut this notch out here. These get in the way a bit of marking up a diagonal line. Which way are we? There we are. And I need that diagonal line here, because that's what I'm going to pin through into the sloping slats behind. I'll also have to sand off the visible faces of the cheek pieces, the ones to which the slats will attach, as it has a coating here of, if I remember rightly, from 20 years ago, Danish oil. An amazing finish, excellent stuff, but wood glue like Titebond won't adhere to that. Glues like Titebond need to key into the grain of the wood. This video isn't going to be hugely interesting to everybody else, using as it does quite a few bits of rather bizarre wood in reuse. But I thought I'd do a little aside which hopefully is a little more interesting. What do these have in common? Brads. This is a flooring brad. I don't know where I got these from. Terrifyingly huge. I don't know what kind of floorboard that would have nailed down. These are brad nailer, nail gun brads. And this is a brad awl. Let's start with that. Here is an awl. It just has a point at the end. And if you push an awl into a piece of wood to make a hole, there's a tendency for it just to push the fibres apart, and the sharper it is, the more it will do that. If on the other hand you take a brad awl with its square end here and you line the square against the fibres, hear that? You break the fibres. So if you send a screw into this hole made by the awl, where are we? Here we are. If you send a screw into this hole made by the awl, the tendency to split the wood will be greater because you're going between the fibres, which the awl has encouraged. If you send a screw into this hole here, because you've broken the fibres, the screw will have less of a tendency to split the wood. Here's a regular nail. Why do you see carpenters sometimes doing this on a hard surface? Same thing, it's to blunt the point of the nail so that as it goes in, it breaks fibres instead of pushing its way between fibres. And then finally, the brad nailer. These things that the brad nailer fires are flat at the end. So again, they tend to break the fibres of the wood. Except in my case, on my shelf runners, I'm going to be firing into the end grain. So the brads are not quite going to be able to do their job. So I'm not totally sure if it's going to work correctly. I haven't fired brads into end grain before, although I've seen plenty of videos where other people have. Well, I have quite a ramshackle collection of clamps and bits of wood here to make up the jig for the fitting of the slats onto the end cheeks of my shoe rack. Of course, this is the other half of the problem. I'm also trying to glue onto end grain, which isn't the best of scenarios. Make sure to get this the right way up with the pin holder at the top, and using that pencil line there, we'll get one brad in there, and one in there, and one in here, and one more in here. I want to glue up this other end here without disturbing the jig that let me do the first end, so I've co-opted the kitchen table and arranged another slightly less impressive and slightly less ramshackle collection of bits of wood and clamps to allow me to set this one here.
The last thing to do, functionally at least, is to put a lip on the front of the slat to stop the shoes sliding off the slope. So I'll take the last of these bed slats and I'll slice them down the middle and I'll fix them on here.
I'll just check that I've got the saw blade in the middle. Yeah, that's certainly close enough. And here's the finished item. I made 4 shoe shelves sloping with lips at the front, and there were still some bed slats left over, so I used the last 3 to make one final additional flat shelf.